Hello everyone, how are you doing? Welcome to Heraclitus e-learning. In last video, I have already shown you how to use the constraint as late as possible and how to use the constraint in finish milestone. In this video, I'm going to continue the tutorial how to use the constraint in start milestone and how to use the deadline in finish milestone and how to create recurring tasks in the schedule. Here I'm going to continue the tutorial how to establish the constraint and deadline and how to create the recurring task. How to use the constraint in start milestone. Constraint start no later than. This constraint sets the start of task to fall no later than a specific date. This constraint can be used for some specific works. Here is the simple schedule for the application of constraint start no later than. Excavation should avoid to work in winter. In order to remind you the start date of excavation, we can put the constraint on the excavation start date. Assume the winter will start 4 November. After that date, excavation should be stopped because the soil is frozen. Estimated excavation duration is 60 days. Using backward calculation, we can calculate the start date of the excavation. Let me show you how to do it. Click the project. Click Project Information. Click down arrow of Schedule From. Select Project Finish Date. In Finish Date, select 4 November. Click OK. Click the duration of Task 4. Field 60. It is calculated that the start date excavation should be 12 August. Then set the constraint start no later than to task 3. And constraint date is set to 12 August. Click constraint type of task 3 and click down arrow and select start no later than. Click constraint date of task 3 and select 12 August. Now I was told the duration of task 2 is not enough. It needs 45 days. Click the duration of task 2. Change the duration to 45. Now you can see the negative total float appeared. It is alerting you that the late completion date of permit application will affect you to start excavation 5 days behind the constraint date. It may cause the additional cost for you to accelerate the excavation to ensure the excavation completion before winter. But when the calculated start date of task 3 is earlier than the constraint date, the constraint task will follow the auto schedule calculation, but the total float is 0. When total float of task 3 is 0, do not trust this total float. Here I change the duration from 45 to 35. You can see the date of task 3 is follow the calculation of auto schedule, which is earlier than the constraint date. But total float is 0. It is not reasonable. Should have positive total float. Start no earlier than. This constraint sets the start of a task to fall no earlier than a specific date. Here is the simple schedule for the application of constraint start no earlier than. Prepare the subbase for slab on grade should be after 17 April. After that day, the soil is no more frozen. We can put the constraint start no earlier than on start milestone task 3. Here in task 3, click constraint type down arrow. Click start no earlier than. Click constraint date to select 17 April. Now I was told the duration of task 2 will be 35 days. Click duration of task 2. Change duration from 40 to 35. The calculated start date of task 3 is earlier than the constraint date. The total float is 4 days. That means even if the permit is allow you to start subbase, but soil still in frozen, and you cannot start subbase preparation until 17 April. How to establish deadline? You also can establish a deadline date for a task. The deadline date differs from a constraint. Setting deadline to the task will not affect the auto schedule calculation. It means the date of task with the deadline can move forward and move backward based on the calculation of auto schedule. Here is the example. I have set the deadline on task 6. If I increase the duration of task 3 from 50 to 55, you can see date of task 6 move forward. The date is calculated with the auto schedule. If I change the duration of task 3 from 55 to 50, the date of task 6 move backward. There is no any constraint on task 6. But since you set deadline date on task 6, it will notify you that a deadline date exists. The green down arrow symbol that you see here tells you there is a deadline setting. If you place your mouse over the deadline indicator, Microsoft Project displays the deadline information. If the task finishes after the deadline date, you also see a symbol in the indicator column. Here I click the duration of task 4 and change the duration from the 60 to 65. you can see there is negative total float, and the earlier finish is later than the late finish, and the early finish is later than late finish, and the late finish date is the same as deadline date in such situation. It tells you that the forecast finish date is later than deadline date. So Microsoft project will automatically pop up the red symbol in the indicator column to remind you you are behind the schedule. Also, please keep in mind that you won't see an indicator if the forecast date of the task 6 is earlier than the deadline date. Change the duration of task 4 from 65 to 55. Now the calculated date of task 6 is earlier than deadline date, and the total float becomes 0. You can see red symbol in indicator column disappeared. It seems not reasonable for total float. If the early finish is earlier than the late finish, should have positive total float value. But now total float appear with 0. It just confused the people. So except for the deadline set on task 6, now I want to set constraint finish no earlier than to the task 6. Click constraint type of task 6 and select no earlier than. Click constraint date of task 6 and select the date 1st January 2021, same as deadline. Now you can see there is a positive total float. If we change the duration of task 4 to 65, you can see the negative total float appeared. Negative or positive total float will tell you the update date of task 6 is later or earlier than deadline. How to create deadline? Double-click task 6 to open task information dialog. Click Advanced. Click down arrow of deadline. Select 1st January 2021. Now the deadline is created. Here I'm going to show you how to create recurring tasks and use recurring tasks in the schedule. Projects often have tasks that occur on a regular basis. The recurring task always will be used in the following cases as example: weekly activity meetings, monthly budget reviews. Following are the steps to create a recurring task as example. Microsoft project always insert the task above the selected task. Here I select excavation and foundation task 2. Click Task tab and go to Insert Group. Click down arrow of Task. Click Recurring Task button to open the Recurring Task Information dialog. Type a name for the recurring task. Here I type in Weekly Construction Activity Meeting. Set the task duration in the duration field. I assume the meeting will last for 2 hours each time, so I fill 2 hours in duration field. On the recurring pattern, assume meeting will be held daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly. Here I select weekly and once a week. Assume the weekly meeting will be held every Friday. Then come to range of recurrence. Select a date for the start of recurring task. Here I select start date 2nd March and select end by date for recurring task. Here I select 1st January 2021. You can notice that after fill the end by date, the schedule calculate the occurrence is 44 times of meeting. Then come to the calendar for scheduling list. Click down arrow of calendar for scheduling this task. Select standard calendar. Check scheduling, ignore resource calendar. Click OK. This is the end of this tutorial. I hope you like it. Thank you for watching this video. If you like it, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. And also, please visit my other tutorials regarding to the Microsoft project. See you next time.